I'm Helena, and at my own wedding reception, another woman ripped my $50,000 dress in front of 400 guests. She was my husband's blonde business partner who thought she deserved him more than me. What my billionaire husband did next left everyone speechless. Before I share the most shocking moment of my wedding day, please subscribe. This story has twists you won't see coming. Hit that notification bell because what happened next changed everything. Here's how my perfect wedding became a battlefield. My name is Helena, and 2 years ago, I lived through what should have been every woman's worst nightmare. But looking back now, that terrible moment actually became the foundation of the strongest marriage I could have ever imagined. Let me tell you exactly what happened on the day that was supposed to be the happiest of my life. I grew up in a small town in Ohio, where my dad worked at the local factory and my mom was a school secretary. We weren't poor, but we definitely weren't rich either. I became a third-grade teacher because I loved kids and wanted to make a difference. I never dreamed I'd end up married to a billionaire, living in a world I'd only seen in movies. I met William at a charity auction for children's literacy programs. I was there representing my school, hoping to win some books for my classroom. He was there writing checks that were bigger than my annual salary. When the auctioneer announced a signed first-edition book set, I raised my paddle hopefully, not realizing I was bidding against tech mogul William Sterling. The bidding went way beyond what I could afford, but William noticed my disappointed face when I had to drop out. After the auction, he approached me with the books. "These belong in a classroom where they'll actually be read," he said, handing them over. That was the beginning of everything. William was different from what I expected. Yes, he was incredibly wealthy, but he was also kind, funny, and genuinely interested in my work with kids. We started dating, and despite coming from completely different worlds, we fell deeply in love. About 6 months into our relationship, William introduced me to his business circle. That's when I first met Sophie Morgan. She was everything I wasn't. Tall, blonde, sophisticated, with a Harvard MBA and a wardrobe that cost more than most people's cars. She'd been William's business partner for over 10 years, running the marketing division of his tech empire. The moment I met her, I could tell she saw me as an intruder. Sophie was always perfectly polite to my face, but I caught the little digs. When William mentioned taking me to Paris, she'd say things like, "Oh, Helena's never been to Europe? How quaint." When we attended business dinners, she'd make comments about my charming simplicity that somehow never felt like compliments. William either didn't notice or chose to ignore it, always changing the subject when I brought up my concerns about Sophie's attitude. The worst part was watching how Sophie acted around William when she thought I wasn't looking. She'd touch his arm during conversations, lean in too close when discussing business, and laugh just a little too hard at his jokes. It was obvious to everyone except William that Sophie had feelings for him. When I mentioned this to him, he'd brush it off, saying Sophie was just a good friend and business partner. 2 years after we met, William proposed during a weekend trip to Napa Valley. It was perfect. Sunset, vineyard, the most beautiful ring I'd ever seen. I said yes without hesitation, even though part of me worried about fitting into his world permanently. The engagement announcement in the society pages felt surreal. Suddenly, I wasn't just Helena the teacher anymore. I was Helena Sterling-to-be, future wife of one of the country's most eligible bachelors. Planning our wedding was like stepping into a fairy tale. William insisted on the best of everything: a beachfront resort in California, a dress from one of the world's top designers, flowers flown in from 3 different countries. The guest list included celebrities, politicians, and business leaders I'd only seen on TV. My parents were overwhelmed but excited, proud that their daughter was marrying someone who clearly adored her. The dress was a work of art, custom-made ivory silk with hand-sewn beading that caught the light like diamonds. It took 4 months to create and cost $50,000, which was more than I used to make in a year teaching. When I first tried it on, I cried. I looked like a princess, like someone worthy of marrying a billionaire. The dress made me feel like I belonged in William's world. The morning of the wedding, I woke up in the bridal suite feeling like the luckiest woman alive. My bridesmaids were there helping with final preparations. My mom was crying happy tears, and everything was going perfectly. As I stepped into that incredible dress for the real thing, I remember thinking that this was the beginning of my happily ever after. The ceremony itself was like something out of a movie. 400 guests watched as William and I exchanged vows on a cliff overlooking the Pacific Ocean. When the minister asked if anyone objected to our union, there was complete silence. I caught Sophie's eye for a moment during that pause, and something in her expression made my stomach flutter with worry, but then the moment passed, and we were pronounced husband and wife. Our first dance as a married couple was to At Last by Etta James. William whispered in my ear about how beautiful I looked, how lucky he felt, how he couldn't wait to start our life together. I felt like I was floating. All my worries about fitting into his world seemed silly now. This was real. We were really married, and I was really going to be okay. The reception was in full swing when I first noticed Sophie acting strangely. She was drinking more than usual, and every time I looked her way, she was staring at William and me with an expression I couldn't quite read. When other guests approached to congratulate us, Sophie would interrupt conversations or make odd comments about how quickly everything had happened between William and me. During the cocktail hour, I overheard Sophie talking to some of William's business associates. She was saying things like, "Well, we all know William has a weakness for charity cases, and I just hope she doesn't change him too much." When one of the men pointed out that William seemed genuinely happy, Sophie's laugh was sharp and bitter. "Happiness and compatibility are two different things," she said. I tried to ignore her behavior and focus on enjoying my wedding day, but Sophie's comments were getting harder to dismiss. When my college roommate mentioned how romantic our love story was, Sophie interrupted with, "Oh yes, very convenient timing too. William was just telling me last month how he wanted to settle down." The implication was clear, that I was just available at the right time, not necessarily special. The real trouble started during dinner. Sophie had been assigned to a table with some of William's oldest friends, people who'd known both her and William for years. I could see her holding court, gesticulating dramatically with her wine glass. I couldn't hear what she was saying, but I could see people looking uncomfortable and glancing over at our head table with worried expressions. After our father-daughter dance, I was greeting guests near the dance floor when Sophie approached me. She was clearly drunk, swaying slightly, with a fixed smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Helena," she said, her voice just loud enough for nearby guests to hear. "We need to talk." I tried to keep things light. "Sophie, this isn't really the time or place. Can we catch up after the honeymoon?" But she stepped closer, invading my personal space in a way that felt threatening. "Actually, this is exactly the time and place," she said, her voice getting louder. "There are some things you should know about your new husband, things he obviously hasn't told you." My heart started racing, but I tried to stay calm. "Sophie, you're drunk. Why don't you get some air or ask someone to call you a car?" That's when her mask finally came off completely. "You know he was going to propose to me first, right?" she said, loud enough now that conversations around us were stopping. "We've been planning it for months, then you showed up with your whole innocent act, and suddenly he's playing Prince Charming to Cinderella." I felt like I'd been slapped. "That's not true, Sophie. William loves me. We're married now, so please just—" "Loves you?" She laughed, and it was an ugly sound. "He feels sorry for you. You trapped him with your small-town charm and your sob stories about underprivileged kids. He needs someone who understands his world, someone who can be a real partner, not a charity project." More guests were turning to look now. I could see William across the room, deep in conversation with some investors, completely unaware of what was happening. I tried to walk away, to end this before it got worse, but Sophie grabbed my arm. "You don't deserve him," she hissed. "You don't deserve any of this. You're nothing but a glorified babysitter who got lucky." "Sophie, please," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "You're making a scene. This is my wedding day." "Your wedding day?" Her eyes were wild now, filled with years of resentment and jealousy. "This should have been my wedding day." That's when she snapped. In one swift, vicious motion, she grabbed the train of my dress with both hands and yanked as hard as she could. I heard the fabric tear, felt the beautiful beadwork scattering across the floor. But she wasn't done. She kept pulling, tearing at the delicate silk like she was trying to destroy not just the dress, but everything it represented. "If I can't have him, you don't deserve this perfect day," she screamed, clawing at the fabric around my waist now. The hand-sewn beading was flying everywhere, catching the light like fallen stars. The ivory silk that had made me feel like a princess was being shredded before my eyes. I was screaming for her to stop, trying to pull away, but Sophie was stronger than she looked and completely out of control. The beautiful dress that had taken months to create was being destroyed in seconds. Other guests were shouting, some trying to intervene, others just standing there in shock with their phones out, recording my humiliation. "Sophie, stop, please stop," I begged, but she was beyond reason now. Security was pushing through the crowd, but not fast enough. By the time they reached us, the damage was done. I was standing there in tatters of what had been the most beautiful dress I'd ever worn, crying and shaking while Sophie continued her screaming rant about how William belonged with her. "William!" she shouted across the room. "Tell her! Tell everyone we belong together! Tell them how you said I was the only woman who really understood you!" The entire reception had come to a standstill. 400 guests were staring at me in my destroyed dress, at Sophie being restrained by security, at the scattered beadwork glittering on the dance floor like evidence of some terrible crime. I felt completely exposed, humiliated beyond anything I'd ever experienced. My parents were rushing over, my bridesmaids were crying, and I just wanted to disappear, but then William was there. He'd pushed through the crowd and was standing in front of me, taking in the scene with an expression I'd never seen before. For a moment, I was terrified that maybe Sophie was right. Maybe there was some truth to what she'd said. Maybe William would be embarrassed by the scene, would quietly ask security to handle things while he tried to salvage the evening. Instead, he walked over to the bandstand and took the microphone from the confused musicians. The room fell silent as 400 guests waited to see what the billionaire groom would say about his business partner destroying his bride's dress. "Ladies and gentlemen," William's voice carried across the stunned crowd, clear and strong, "I need to address what just happened here." My heart was pounding. I had no idea what he was going to say, but I braced myself for damage control, for some diplomatic way of handling this disaster. "Sophie Morgan has been my business partner for 10 years, he continued, his eyes finding mine across the room. "But she has never been anything more than that. She has never been my choice, my heart, or my future. Helena is—" He handed the microphone to the band leader and walked over to me, his jacket already off his shoulders. Without saying a word, he wrapped it around me, covering the torn dress, and pulled me close. "This dress cost $50,000, he said, loud enough for everyone to hear. "But it's just fabric. The woman wearing it is priceless." Then he looked directly at Sophie, who was still being held by security, mascara running down her face. "Sophie, you've crossed every line tonight. Your obsession ends now. You're no longer welcome in our lives or in my business." The crowd was completely silent as William led me onto the dance floor. My beautiful dress was destroyed, I was wearing my husband's jacket over the torn silk, and I'd never felt more beautiful in my life. As we started to dance, slowly at first, then with more confidence, I realized that this moment was defining our marriage in the best possible way. One by one, our guests joined us on the dance floor. My parents, my bridesmaids, William's family, even some of the business associates who'd witnessed Sophie's meltdown. They were showing their support not just for our marriage, but for the way William had handled the crisis. Instead of being embarrassed by the drama, they seemed impressed by his unwavering loyalty to me. As we danced, William whispered in my ear, "I'm sorry you had to go through that. Sophie's been struggling with some personal issues, but I never imagined she'd do something like this." "Did you really not know how she felt about you?" I asked. He was quiet for a moment, then sighed. "I suspected, but I hoped I was wrong. I should have handled it better, should have been clearer with her years ago. I never wanted you to be hurt by my mistakes. Looking back now, I realize that night taught us something valuable about our relationship. When everything went wrong, when I was at my most vulnerable and humiliated, William didn't hesitate to choose me. He didn't try to quietly manage the situation or protect his business interests. He publicly, unequivocally, chose his wife over everything else. Sophie was escorted off the property that night and fired from the company the following Monday. We heard later that she'd been struggling with some mental health issues and had developed an unhealthy obsession with William over the years. I actually felt sorry for her, in a way. Loving someone who doesn't love you back is painful, but destroying other people's happiness doesn't heal that pain. The torn dress hangs in our closet now, not as a reminder of that awful moment, but as a symbol of what we survived together. Sometimes the worst moments reveal the most important truths. That night showed me that William would always have my back, no matter what. It showed our guests the kind of man they were celebrating. And it showed Sophie that her fantasy was never going to become reality. Our marriage has been stronger ever since. We learned to communicate better, to address problems before they become crises. William made changes to ensure that no business associate would ever again feel entitled to interfere in our personal life. And I learned that I don't have to be perfect or prove my worth to anyone. The right person will choose you even when you're standing in a torn dress, crying and humiliated. That was 2 years ago. Sophie was banned from our lives forever, and we've never looked back. My torn dress hangs in our closet, not as a bad memory, but as proof that love survives anything. Sometimes the worst moments show you who really has your back. What would you have done in my situation? Would you have handled it differently? Comment below and let me know your thoughts. And don't forget to subscribe for more shocking real-life stories. Trust me, I have plenty more where this came from. And your support means everything to me as I share these difficult but important moments from my life. Thanks for listening to my truth.